Fred Warner as a real DPOY candidate, is it a local creation? I thought it was until Peter King just came on and said he's got him as number 2 on his list.
Yeah, my jaw dropped, probably literally for those watching on YouTube, right, when he said that. I was stunned just based on the fact that Warner, I think when the 49ers were 5-0, was playing at that level. I think the last couple of games he's played at that level and really been a tone setter for the entire 49er defense. I mean, I go back to the Pittsburgh game and he's laying guys out early on in that one, which I think really allowed them to dominate early and carry it home. But I do feel like there's a culpability for, he didn't play. I don't think he played great in the middle 3 games. And it's rare for me to be able to look around and see, the defense as a whole didn't play great either. But to say, I think Fred Warner would tell you, I didn't play great in those 3 games. So to basically be great 70% of the time and have that be enough when you're a linebacker, that was a little surprising to me.
Yeah.
And again, the 7 games the Niners have won, I'm with you. He's been at that level. But to me, you got to be at that level 10 for 10, even if you are not coming out on top.
I get you. I get what you're saying, but to me, it feels a little bit unfair because when we talk about like pass rushers and edge rushers, all they have to do is put up big numbers and big stats, and we don't have to really worry about them being, consistently good. But when you're a linebacker and you're the anchor of the defense, well, then we look at you a little bit of in a different light in terms of, like Myles Garrett. If he leads the league in sacks and Cleveland's defense is top 5, well, he wins the award because it's like being the biggest home run hitter on the best team in baseball. You get to be MVP.
Yeah, who's the best player in the best team, right?
Right.
So if you're the best defense and you're the best player on that defense, you're in the mix.
I guess so, but if you're the best defensive player and you're the edge rusher, and, Cleveland's got a lot of guys, as Niner fans would tell you, Cleveland was more than just Myles Garrett when they came in and beat San Francisco in that game in Cleveland. But Fred Warner, what he does, and I think about like the stat line that he puts together from tackles to interceptions to forced fumbles, recovered fumbles, and all the rest of it. If they are the best defense, the Niners, and they might be by the end of the year, doesn't he merit some sort of extra consideration as the captain of that defense?
I think he does, and just my quick glance here, I think the 49ers are now number 1 in points allowed in the NFL.
Right.
And
is that how we measure number 1 defense? Is it
it's yards is number 1 defense, I think, from a statistical standpoint. I always tend to look at points. So I don't know where they are in terms of yards off the top, but I just did points allowed and the 157, and I know not everybody's played the same amount of games at this point, but I think for the purposes of this conversation, that doesn't matter. The Ravens have played, I guess, 1 more game and have allowed 23 more points or 20 more points than the 49ers have. But yeah, 157 for the Niners in the 10 games. So it's a 15.7 average. So again, if they're not 1, they're right there near the top. And so for them to be at that point, given some of the struggles of the 3-game losing streak, I do think that adds a little cred toward whether you want to go with Fred Warner and the level of consideration you would give to Fred Warner.
Right, and you look at a team that is that good defensively, and if they are number 1 in overall points, then you look at the best defender on the Niners, and I think that it's been Fred Warner. Nick Bosa's had a good year, but statistically, he hasn't had nearly the year that you would look at as DPOY, and certainly when he won it last year. Here is Peter King from earlier this hour when we talked about the Niners and the defense, a question that JD asked, and specifically he talked about Fred Warner.
To me, it's right now Myles Garrett and Fred Warner for Defensive Player of the Year.
Wow.
That's how great Warner has been. But Fred Warner will tell you right now, he'll say, he goes, listen, I'm sure people have talked to him about it there. I'm sure he would say, listen, my job is immensely helped by what's happening right in front of me because offensive lines cannot block 4 49ers with 4 guys. They just can't. And then with the extra guy looking at the linebackers, they need to have all 5 guys blocking that line. And so that's why guys like Fred Warner have the ability, at least part of the ability, to go up and make plays and clean things up the way they do.
And that's a fair point, and I'm glad Peter made that because ultimately a defense that's number one in points allowed, and they're fifth, by the way, JD, in yards allowed. And
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really good. And Baltimore actually is ahead of them, and they've played one more game. So Baltimore, when their bye hits, I think in week 13, they'll jump up the list when everyone else catches up to them in terms of games played, but they're number one in points allowed. And Peter does make a good point about, an overall team defense, especially as a linebacker, where you're only going to be as effective as your front four is in terms of not only absorbing blocks in the run game, but also getting home in the pass game.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, this team is recommitted defensively, it feels like, these last couple of games. And I think the standard by which Fred Warner sets for the rest of that defense as the leader and really the vocal leader, right? Nick Bosa is the best player when he's at the fullest of his capabilities. Fred Warner's pretty damn good. But I think as much as this thing is built for the 49ers around the defensive line, Warner's the guy going around hitting people and trucking people and making sure the intensity is there. And it really is Warner and Greenlaw when they're both healthy and flying around that lay the wood, and then the other guys get home as the game goes on. So and the ability to cover and tackle. Like the Niners were a poor tackling team in the 3 games that they lost. They're getting back to being a better tackling team, which I think is of the utmost importance if this team's going to get on a big run.
And I think the defense has looked a lot different with Chase Young being back and obviously coming off of the bye where you were able to get Nick Bosa a little bit fresher and Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave and the rest of the guys up front. Then you add Chase Young and, Dre Greenlaw did get healthy, and you also were able to add, a rested Fred Warner to the mix, but now you don't have Talanoa Hufanga, who is out for the year with a torn ACL. Dr. Nirav Pandya coming up here in 5 minutes. We'll ask him about the surgery and the rehab based on what we know about the tear from Hufanga. Just looking at the DPOY odds, JD, according to DraftKings, Myles Garrett is plus 110, which is even money to win DPOY. Micah Parsons is 2-1, and TJ Watt plus 275, which is 11-4. It's basically just short of 3-1 odds.
Edge rusher.
Exactly. Then a big jump up to edge rusher Nick Bosa, who's 20-1. Then Chris Jones and Max Crosby at 22-1, along with Aiden Hutchinson. Then Danielle Hunter, edge rusher. Then Fred Warner, 30-1.
Okay.
So if you think that Fred Warner's got a chance,
could win some cake.
30-1, it's nice. It's a nice price. It's better than you can get on Brock Purdy right now.
That is a nice price. That has me thinking, you know what? Maybe I'll lay 10 grand on that. I'm kidding.
I mean, even $10 would be 10 get you 300 is the way that works.
Listen to me.
At 30-1.
Talking a big game.
I love it.
No, I like that value. That's worth a flyer, honestly.
Coach of the year, Dan Campbell is your favorite right now, plus 125.
My guy.
Your guy, Dan Campbell, and coming up in the 5 o'clock
that
hour.
Feels like a lock at this point.
JD's mea culpa. D'Amico Ryans, though, don't sleep on D'Amico at plus 275.
No doubt, and I think if they end up making the playoffs, he could maybe overtake Campbell, especially if the Lions wind up, let's say, what are they, 8-2 right now? Like maybe the Lions end up 4-3 or something like that in their remaining games to get to say 12-5 or something like that, and the Texans make the playoffs. Maybe it flips there, but yeah, potential public apology coming for Dan Campbell.
I like it.
From yours truly.
I like
you
it.
Got to admit when you're wrong.
Mike McDaniel is plus 550. Then Kevin O'Connell, nice little surge from Minnesota with Josh Dobbs. He's 9-1. Then Sirianni, Mike Tomlin. Then you get to Kyle Shanahan at plus 2,200.
O'Connell's another one. I'm not surprised where Shanahan is. At this point, I think some would view the 49ers at 7-3 as underachieving a little bit. And so I think he's out of that mix. They'd have to run the table, I think, for Shanahan to really get legitimate consideration. But O'Connell is an interesting one. And now they got beat by Denver, but they were on a roll to do it after starting 0-3 and then to do it after losing Kirk Cousins to get into the playoffs. And I have put this out on social media, but I don't know that I've said it on the air. I think the NFC is set. right now as far as teams that are going to make the playoffs. I don't know whether, I think the seeding for sure will change, but I think the 7 teams that are going to make the playoffs are the current 7 teams: Philly, Detroit, the Niners, whoever wins the South. That's my one caveat. I don't even care who wins the South. It's gross.
Who do you think will win the South?
It probably should be New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah.
Probably should be New Orleans.
I liked Atlanta at the start of the year, but their quarterback shuffle has been disturbing in terms of who they've had healthy and who they've actually liked.
Yeah, so I throw New Orleans. I throw the South, crappy South winner is what I've characterized that as. But I think Philly, Detroit, Niners. I think Dallas, Seattle, and Minnesota are going to be the 3 wild card teams, and I don't see anybody else. Green Bay, the Rams, Washington, the Giants. Again, somebody's got to win the South, but I think we know the 7.
Yeah, be interesting to see how it all shakes out, and I think there's a real race for 1, 2, and 3, and there might be a little bit of a race for 6 and 7. Feels like Dallas is going to be the top wild card, and they'll be the 5, but still plenty of football left to go.